Hello everyone, it's the weekend, and that means I am here to talk about an episode of an animated superhero cartoon. This week I will be talking about the Batman the Animated Series episode Heart of Ice. I should go ahead and say that I've never been a fan of Mr. Freeze. I've always thought that he was just a pale imitation of Two-Face. Think about it for a second. Both of them used to be good men, servants to the city of Gotham in some way. They both had loving wives and or girlfriends and or fiancés, and then a tragic accident mutilates them both, setting them on their paths to the dark side. This isn't just a case of, oh, they're slightly similar. This is a case of, oh, they're exactly the same character with identical backstories. And while basically everyone on the internet wants to make babies with this episode, this is the episode that cements this backstory for Mr. Freeze. Before this episode, Mr. Freeze was not the villain that you would think of when you were thinking of the most memorable Batman villains. In fact, originally, he was called Mr. Zero. It wasn't until the live-action Adam West series in the 1960s where his name was changed to Mr. Freeze. So as much as I love and adore Paul Dini's writing, seriously, if you're only familiar with his work on this television show, I urge you to check out his work in comic books. Not only his work in the Batman comics, which was really awesome, but some of his non-Batman work as well, like Madame Mirage and Mutant Texas. He really is rehashing Two-Face here. We're not getting a two-part origin, and in fact, all of the origin is given to us in the form of exposition and videotapes that show us what happened. In fact, even though I maintain that this episode and character is a little derivative, I actually think this episode improves on the Two-Face two-parter, as I had quite a few problems with that episode. For anyone who hasn't seen the episode, this is what goes down. Dr. Victor Freeze used to be an employee of GothCorp, and was using company money and equipment to try and save his wife Nora, who has some kind of unnamed disease. The CEO of the company, Ferris Boyle, is a real scumbag who lays claim to the equipment Victor is using and intends to shut down the equipment, which Victor says will kill his wife. Boyle shoves Victor into a table full of chemicals, which kinda screws over Victor. Now he has to wear a mechanical suit in order to even survive. So in the present day, he's stealing components from GothCorp that will let him build a gigantic freeze ray which, if I'm not mistaken, will freeze all of Gotham. Batman must stop Freeze from doing what he does, but he's not unsympathetic to him, and he takes the videotape that was deep in the archives of GothCorp and gives it to Gotham's favorite reporter, Summer Gleason. Cue credits. So I really love the idea of Mr. Freeze acting like he no longer is subject to human emotions. The idea is that he is emotionally cold as well as physically cold, but deep down he is full of it. He's actually very emotional, and it almost feels like he is clinging on to these emotions because that's all he has left of his old life. This is all very great stuff, and it's deeper than I ever expected this show to go. And I'm not trying to make a dig at the show. I really love this series, but this is especially sophisticated, and I love it very much. One thing I question is the way this character can be used multiple times as a recurring villain. Sometimes this can be the biggest problem writers have in trying to give a villain motivation. You have someone like the Joker. He just wants to watch the world burn, to appropriate a line from the film The Dark Knight. So that's a guy we can expect to see multiple times, and in fact, we have in this show already. And there's no limitations on his motivations. But look at Mr. Freeze. Before he becomes a full-on villain, his only motivation is to save his wife. While it's not outright spoken in this episode, it is heavily hinted that she dies thanks to the callous CEO Ferris Boyle. But if you're familiar with later stories featuring this version of Freeze, we know that she is not dead. So what is Mr. Freeze trying to get revenge for? He certainly acts like it's for his lost wife. I'd be okay with him getting revenge for his own body no longer being recognizably human, but that's not what we're given here. And furthermore, if his wife isn't dead, and we are to believe that Ferris Boyle gets his day off in prison, then why would Mr. Freeze ever return to a life of crime? I don't exactly know the answer to that, but I do know Freeze does get used several more times later in this series, and it just doesn't make any sense that he would, at least not as a villain. Based on the origin that we get here, I really think Freeze would work marvelously as a one-time villain, but as a recurring foe, his story here doesn't quite work. And then there's the whole business of Mr. Freeze trying to freeze all of Gotham City. This was used in the Batman and Robin movie. It did not work there, and it does not work here. Just because Freeze can't come outside without dying doesn't really mean that he would want to somehow freeze the entire city or the planet, does it? I'm not even sure how that would work, scientifically speaking. Honestly, I think this episode could have been rewritten so that Freeze only wants to kill Ferris Boyle, and it would have been fine. This change wouldn't have even needed the plot to be rewritten very much, to be honest. It just feels like the people behind the show wanted it to feel big, so they included a sinister plan to freeze the entire city or the entire world. And I just don't think that it needs to be that big. If anything, it gets in the way of this story. Let me talk about Batman himself a little bit, since I haven't very much in this video. Like some of the other episodes we've seen so far, he's kinda inconsequential to the episode. I mean, he's there to stop the bad guy from triumphing and bring the other bad guy to justice. But he doesn't get a whole heck of a lot to do. He saves the life of a cad, he gets a cold from being shot at by Mr. Freeze, and we get to see some of his mastery of disguise. All in a day's work for the Caped Crusader. He's basically the vehicle for the plot to happen. I guess you could say there's a parallel between Victor Freeze and Batman, very similar to the parallel between Joker and Batman in the graphic novel The Killing Joke. One bad day can ruin a person's life. For Bruce Wayne, he lost both of his parents, and while he is still acting out because of that night, he's turned that loss into something constructive for the whole city and the rest of the world. For Victor Freeze, he loses his wife, or doesn't depending on retcons from later episodes, and is permanently mutated. But instead of refusing to let life beat him down and do something positive like Batman has, he becomes a criminal. There isn't a great deal of emphasis put on this idea as there is in The Killing Joke, but it's definitely there. The best kinds of themes are the ones that aren't hitting you in the face, and this one isn't, so props all around. Overall, I'd say this is a really solid episode, and it deserves most of the praise it gets, despite a few things here that just aren't working. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and this episode of Batman, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more videos from myself. And if you like hearing me talk about the animated episodes like I did here, come back next week to hear me talk about an episode of the Legion of Superheroes cartoon. And come back in 2 weeks to hear me talk about the 2-part episode of Batman, The Cat and the Claw. Until then, I've got videos of other things going up throughout the week, so be sure to come back to see stuff almost every other day of the week. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.